I once believed in loyalty, in bonds forged through fire, trials, and countless sleepless nights. We laughed together, bled together, and made promises that were meant to last a lifetime. But it was all a lie. There's a peculiar kind of blindness that comes with trust. You pour yourself into the connections you make, fortifying them with pieces of your heart, your time, your very essence. And in the haze of that trust, you become oblivious to the shadows lurking behind the smiles. The betrayal didn't come as a single clean strike. No, it was like a slow-acting poison, seeping into my veins without my notice. A betrayal meticulously crafted and executed. It started with small things, the type of slights you convince yourself to ignore. Maybe they were busy. Maybe I misunderstood. But slowly those slights piled up, and the truth began to pierce through the fog of denial. I remember the exact moment the illusion shattered. It was a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Their laughter, casual and carefree, stabbed at me like a knife. Every word they spoke coated in malice disguised as mockery. They thought they were clever, hiding their intentions in plain sight, assuming I was too trusting, too naive to ever see it coming. I can still feel the chill that washed over me, a wave of shock followed by a creeping, suffocating rage. It started deep in my chest, a cold knot that burned with every beat of my heart. How could they? After everything we'd been through, every time I had been there for them, every sacrifice I'd made, I replayed it in my mind, over and over again, trying to find where it all went wrong. Was it something I said? A moment I overlooked? The thought that they had been laughing at me all this time, plotting behind my back, made my skin crawl. I felt the knife twist, not just in my back, but through my heart. They didn't just betray my trust. They shattered the very foundation of everything I believed in. It was like standing on solid ground, only to realize, in one horrifying moment, that it was quicksand. I remember the bitterness that came next, seeping into my thoughts like ink spreading through water. It wasn't a passing emotion. It was a transformation. The kind of change that marks a turning point. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. The sadness, the shock, they were all swallowed by something deeper. It was no longer sadness or disappointment. It was pure, undiluted wrath. I could feel it pulse through me, a relentless beat that refused to be ignored. My world, once colored by hope and trust, now turned shades of dark crimson. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble under the weight of their treachery. They couldn't have been more wrong. It's funny how betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. The person who once smiled easily, who gave without hesitation, is gone. In their place stands something new, something darker. They've created a monster of their own making. It's almost poetic, the way their deceit has come full circle. They have no idea what's coming for them, no clue about the storm they've unleashed. I've made a decision, one that courses through my veins with a clarity I've never felt before. They will feel my wrath, and it will be unlike anything they've ever known. I didn't immediately know what to do with the anger. At first, it was like trying to tame a wildfire, a blaze that consumed every thought, every part of me that still held on to who I used to be. The old me would have tried to mediate, to find a middle ground, to talk things through. But that person is dead now. buried under the ashes of my former trust. What remains is something new, something sharp-edged and unyielding. I spent days in silence, pacing in the confines of my room like a caged animal. I could feel the rage thrumming under my skin, an electric current that made my hands shake, my heart race. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, heard their laughter, felt the sting of their betrayal all over again. I started to see everything with a different clarity, a sharpness that was almost painful. I could pinpoint every moment I'd been naive, every time I had let them get away with a slight, every instance where I had turned a blind eye to their manipulations. The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I had been blind, but no more. The fog of trust was gone, and with it any hesitation I might have once had. I let the rage flow through me, no longer fighting it but embracing it, letting it become a part of me. It was a fuel, a fire that burned away the remnants of my old self, leaving something stronger in its wake. I started planning, not in a frenzy but with a cold, calculated calm. This wasn't going to be a mindless act of vengeance. No, I was going to be precise. I was going to make sure they knew exactly why they were suffering, that they felt the full weight of what they had done. It was like awakening a sleeping beast within me, one that had been dormant for far too long. Every move I made felt deliberate, every thought a step closer to the reckoning that was coming for them. It was almost exhilarating, the way the fear shifted from my heart to theirs. I could see it in their eyes when they looked at me, a flicker of uncertainty they couldn't hide. They sensed it, the change in me. They knew something was different, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. That was fine. I wanted them to feel that unease, that creeping sense of dread that comes when you realize you've made a fatal mistake. They thought they had broken me, but they had only sharpened my edges. The hunt had begun and I was ready to strike. I would watch them squirm, let them feel a fraction of the fear they had made me feel. I began gathering everything I needed, piecing together the puzzle of their lives with a new sense of purpose. I knew their weaknesses, their fears, the secrets they thought were buried too deep to ever surface. I collected each one like a trophy, savoring the anticipation of what was to come. I started small, sowing seeds of doubt, playing on their insecurities. I let them feel safe, allowed them the comfort of their routine, all while lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. Every interaction was a calculated move, a step in the dance of destruction I was leading them into. The first time I saw the fear in their eyes, real unfiltered fear, it was intoxicating. It was like a drug, a heady rush that surged through me, confirming that I was on the right path. This was just the beginning. I wanted them to know that the storm was coming, that they had no one to blame but themselves. The hunt was no longer just a pursuit. It was a game, and I was the master of it. I let the anticipation build, knowing that every second of peace they felt now would only make the fall that much harder. They had made their move, and now it was my turn. They will feel my wrath, and they will remember this for the rest of their lives. I stood before them, my silence louder than any words I could have spoken. It was a strange moment, almost surreal, seeing the fear etched on their faces. The tables had turned. They were no longer the ones laughing, no longer the ones in control. The power they once held over me had evaporated, replaced by a raw and undeniable terror. I watched as they struggled to understand what was happening, their eyes darting between each other, searching for answers that weren't there. They could feel it. The shift in the air, the palpable tension thickening like a storm cloud about to burst. It was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when the masks they wore so effortlessly finally slipped, revealing their true selves. They tried to speak, of course. They always do. The excuses, the lies, the pitiful attempts to justify their actions poured out of their mouths. Each word more desperate than the last. It was almost amusing, listening to them scramble for any thread of logic and any flimsy explanation they thought might save them. They talked over each other, voices rising, panic bleeding into their words. They were trying to paint a picture, one where they were the victims, where it was all a misunderstanding. But their words fell flat, a hollow echo in the space between us. I remained silent, watching, letting them dig their own graves with every lie they told. In those moments, I realized just how pathetic they were. The bravado they once flaunted was gone, replaced by a fragile veneer of bravado that cracked with every passing second. Their faces, once smug and filled with arrogance, now twisted into expressions of disbelief and fear. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. They had built their lives on deceit, on manipulation, and now, faced with the consequences of their actions, they had nothing left to stand on. I could see the realization dawning in their eyes, that dawning horror, as they understood they were no longer in control of this situation. They were at my mercy, and I had none left to give. I felt no pity as I watched them. They had taken everything from me, my trust, my loyalty, my very sense of self. And for what? For their own selfish gain, their own amusement. They had played their games, never once considering the damage they left in their wake. They never imagined that I would be the one standing here, unbroken, staring them down with the kind of cold fury they had never seen before. It was almost poetic, the way the roles had reversed. They were the ones trembling now, their voices shaking, their hands fidgeting as they realized they were powerless. I let the silence stretch, savoring the moment, letting them sit in their fear. It was a fitting punishment for all the times they had made me question myself, all the nights I had spent sleepless and tormented by their betrayal. I could see them looking at each other, as if hoping one of them might have an answer, a way out of the trap they had walked into. But there was no escape. They had crossed a line they could never uncross, and now they were facing the consequences. I took a step closer, and they flinched as if I had struck them. The power shift was intoxicating. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. One of them, the one who had always been the ringleader, tried to speak again. He stepped forward, a pitiful attempt at asserting some kind of authority, as if his words still held weight. His voice cracked as he spoke, his bravado faltering with every syllable. He was trying to appeal to my sense of reason, trying to weave a narrative where this was all some big misunderstanding. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. He was terrified, but he was also desperate. He thought he could still manipulate me, still pull the strings and get what he wanted. I let him speak, not because I believed a word he was saying, but because I wanted to see him squirm. I wanted him to feel the hopelessness, the helplessness that I had felt. Every lie he told only fueled the fire burning inside me, solidifying my resolve. I could see the others watching him, clinging to his every word, hoping against hope that he might somehow turn this around. But I knew better. I had seen through their masks, seen the rot beneath the surface. They were rotten to the core, and no amount of pretty words could change that. When I finally spoke, it was like the crack of thunder after a long, tense silence. The sound of my voice startled them as if they had forgotten I was even capable of speech. I kept my words measured, cold, each one delivered with the precision of a blade. I reminded them of every lie they had told, every betrayal they had committed. I watched as their faces crumbled, the shock of my words hitting them like a physical blow. They had expected me to be emotional, to lash out in a fit of rage. They didn't expect this calculated calm, this icy control. It threw them off balance, left them scrambling for something to hold on to. One of them fell to their knees, begging for forgiveness. The sight was almost pathetic, watching them grovel, reduced to nothing more than a whimpering shell of the person they once pretended to be. It was the same person who had laughed at me, who had conspired behind my back without a second thought. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a cold thrill at seeing them like this. It was exactly what they deserved. They had taken everything from me, stripped me bare, left me with nothing but my own rage to cling to. And now, they were the ones left bare, exposed for the cowards they truly were. I let them beg, let them plead, their voices filling the air like the cries of dying animals. It didn't move me. It didn't soften the hard edges of my resolve. If anything, it only solidified it. I had made my choice. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about finding some kind of closure or healing old wounds. This was about justice. About making sure they felt every ounce of the pain they had inflicted on me. I watched them squirm, their eyes wide with terror as they realized there was no way out, no escape from the reckoning that was upon them. Their pleas grew louder, more frantic, until it was almost deafening. They were desperate, grasping at straws, hoping that somehow they could sway me, but they couldn't. I had become something they couldn't manipulate, something they couldn't control. I had become their worst nightmare. I leaned in close, looking each one of them in the eyes, letting them see the cold, unyielding wrath that burned within me. I wanted them to understand in those final moments that this was their doing. They had created this monster standing before them, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. I stepped back, letting the silence fall over us like a shroud. It was over. The game was finished, and they had lost. I watched as the realization sank in as the last flicker of hope died in their eyes. They knew now that there was nothing left to say, nothing left to do, but accept their fate. I turned my back on them, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. It wasn't relief or satisfaction I felt. It was something deeper, something colder. It was the finality of it, the understanding that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. But I didn't regret it, not for a second. I had delivered my justice, and they would remember this day for the rest of their lives, however long or short that might be. They had felt my wrath, and now they would live with the consequences. I walked away, leaving them behind, their cries fading into the distance. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The dust has settled now. It's quiet, almost eerily so. The world feels muted, as if holding its breath. A breath waiting for something that will never come. I stand alone in the aftermath, surrounded by the echoes of what once was. The wreckage is all around me, not just the physical destruction, but the intangible ruins of relationships and memories that have been razed to the ground. I thought this moment would feel different. I thought I would feel a rush of victory, a sense of satisfaction washing over me like a wave. Instead, there's just silence, a hollow, empty silence that stretches endlessly. I look at my reflection in a shattered mirror, fragments scattered across the floor like the pieces of a broken life. The face staring back at me is familiar but changed, hardened in ways I never thought possible. The eyes are mine, but they're colder now, carrying the weight of what I've done, what I've become. It's a strange feeling, standing on the other side of my vengeance. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my mind, pictured it as the triumphant end to a long and painful journey. But as I stand here now, I realize there's no triumph in this, no real victory. It's like climbing to the top of a mountain only to find that the peak is shrouded in fog, obscuring the view I thought would be waiting for me. I walk through the ruins, the remnants of what I destroyed still smoldering in my wake. It's almost poetic, the way everything looks now. Once vibrant and alive, it's all been reduced to ash and rubble. I kneel down, sifting through the debris with my fingers, feeling the rough texture of the broken pieces. These were once parts of my life. Pieces of a puzzle I had cherished, built carefully and with trust. Now they're nothing more than shattered remnants, beyond repair. It's strange, the way I feel almost detached from it all, as if I'm observing someone else's life, someone else's destruction. I thought that seeing them suffer would bring me closure. I thought that making them feel my wrath would heal the wounds they left behind. That the act of revenge would fill the gaping hole in my chest. But standing here now, I realize how naive that was. Revenge doesn't heal. It only deepens the wound, carving it out into something darker, something irreversible. I thought I could find peace in their screams, in the look of terror on their faces. For a moment I did. There was a fleeting sense of power, a brief high that surged through me like a drug. But it faded just as quickly, leaving behind an emptiness that feels even deeper than before. I walk to the edge of what used to be a place filled with laughter and warmth, a place where I once felt safe. The memories come unbidden, flashing before my eyes like scenes from a movie I no longer want to watch. I see their faces, the way they used to look at me with trust, with love, or at least what I believed was love. I can still hear the echoes of our shared moments, the laughter that now feels like a distant, mocking sound. It's all tainted now, twisted into something ugly by the betrayal and the vengeance that followed. I wonder if I'll ever be able to remember those times without feeling the sting of what came after. I doubt it. I thought I was in control of the situation, that I was the one holding the strings, but now I'm not so sure. The vengeance consumed me, became a part of me in ways I didn't anticipate. It seeped into my thoughts, my actions, until it was all I could think about, all I could feel. I let it guide me, shape me into something unrecognizable. And now, standing in the aftermath, I'm left to wonder if I've become the very thing I sought to destroy. I used to see myself as a victim, someone who had been wronged, but now I'm not sure what I am anymore. Am I the hero of this story, or the villain? Or is there no hero at all? Just a spiral of pain and retribution that led us all to this point. I sit down bones to ground, the cold seeping into my bones, grounding me in the reality of what I've done. I can still feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, the remnants of the storm that raged inside me. It's fading now, replaced by a numbness that spreads through my limbs like ice. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, watching the mist curl into the air, dissolving into nothing. It feels like a metaphor for everything I've lost. Here one moment, gone the next, leaving no trace behind. I wonder if they ever think about me now, if they lie awake at night, haunted by what happened, by the choices they made that led us to this point. I wonder if they regret it, if they understand the pain they caused, or if they've managed to bury it, to rationalize it away as something they had to do. It doesn't matter now, I suppose. They've faced my wrath, felt the full force of what I've become. Whether they understand it or not is no longer my concern. I've moved past them, but in doing so, I've also moved past parts of myself I don't think I'll ever recover. The quiet stretches on, unbroken by any sound. It feels like the world is holding its breath, as if it's waiting for me to make the next move, to decide where I go from here. But I don't have an answer. For the first time in a long time, I don't have a plan. The fire that drove me, that pushed me forward, has burned out, leaving only cold ashes in its place. I thought I knew what I wanted, but now I'm left standing in the ruins, uncertain of what comes next. The person I was before is gone, and the person I've become doesn't know where to go from here. I get up slowly, brushing the dirt from my hands, feeling the weight of everything I've done settle over me like a heavy cloak. There's no undoing it, no turning back time. The path I chose is behind me, and the only thing left to do is keep moving forward, even if I don't know where it leads. I take a step, then another, each one feeling heavier than the last. I walk away from the wreckage, not looking back. There's nothing left for me there. Nothing but memories and regrets that I refuse to carry any longer. I step into the unknown, feeling the wind against my face, cold and sharp. It's a new chapter, but it feels like the end of something. The closing of a book I never wanted to write. I don't know what lies ahead, but I know one thing for certain. I've changed, in ways I can't fully comprehend yet. I've become something different, something darker. I don't know if I'll ever find peace, or if the wrath that fueled me will ever truly fade. But I do know this. Anyone who crosses me again will know what it feels like to face the full force of what I've become. They will feel my wrath, and they will never forget it.